Well, hello. This is another answer time because we've got a new question. A new question. There we go. Ah, just got done eating. My tongue's all in food mode, I guess. The question is as follows: how worried should individuals be about the potential for Roe v. Wade (parentheses) and cases that cite it as precedents, like I always say this wrong, Obergefell v. Hodges (in parentheses) to be overturned? Okay, so this is talking about the leaked majority opinion uh, in the Mississippi case, which, in the leaked opinion, it overturns Roe v. Wade. Okay, Mississippi abortion restriction case, to be clear. We are not. There was not a case debating whether or not Mississippi exists. It exists. Okay, so we gotta stop. We gotta step back to the beginning on this. First thing is that was a draft opinion from February. Um, Often these opinions are, well, so number one, when an opinion is written, the majority, when they voted, get together and decide who's going to write an opinion. In this case, they chose Alito. Alito writes an opinion and he sends it around to all the people who agreed with him. They give their feedback. Um, After they give their feedback, um, Alito keeps revising it until they have something that they can all sign off on. This isn't like one of those deals where Alito writes it and then people sign on it or not. The majority has to agree to the opinion. Alito is will be the one um, giving the with the most control over it. It is his writing, but it's not it's not his opinion alone. It has to reflect the majority, and then concurring opinions where they either want to reinforce or double down or slightly differ in reasoning or what they think should have been the exact majority opinion will get written and published by the people who signed on to the majority. So that's a long process. This is expected to come out. The ruling's expected in, I think, June. A lot of things happen. That's a lot of months. That's 4 months. Um, we don't know that that's the current wording. Like these things apparently, because normally we don't see the drafts. Normally we only get the final opinion. Um, Apparently, normally there's a lot of change that can happen. So um, that draft basically overturns Roe versus Wade. It's possible that a later draft only it doesn't go as far. Only changes interpretations and implications, like Casey versus Planned Parenthood of Southwest Pennsylvania did in '93. Point is, don't take what you see now to be what is definitely the opinion that comes out. Also, um, sometimes votes will change even because, say, they chose Alito to write something up, and one of the other justices is like, I'm not going to sign on to that. That can push someone into opposing, and that flips things in this case in a 5-4 case. And that apparently has happened before. Will it happen this time? Probably not, but it shows that there's limitations on what will be agreed to. Um, Now, let's assume that it gets through exactly verbatim like it was in February. I have not read the full opinion. that full leaked opinion. I've read some snippets that were in news articles here and there. I don't find reading this draft opinion to be necessarily super instructive for the reasons I just discussed. But the snippets that I've read um, need a bit of a history lesson to understand, I think, one of the more important implications hasn't that isn't being as analyzed as I think it should be. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of very important implications here. Um, so I understand one falling by the side, but I think that it contextualizes the meaning of the potential decision in a important way, um, without necessarily having any implicit value judgment in it, which I think is fairly rare on this one. Okay, so the importance is a discussion of originalism. Okay, so Roe versus Wade and the Connecticut contraception case before it were not what someone would call originalist rulings. So, what is originalism? Originalism is that the Constitution is what it says, it's what it means, and if we're not sure exactly what the text means, just to a plain reading, then we go and we look at things the founding fathers said for context. But really, it's what the law says is what it is, specifically about the Constitution. That seems, these days, that's considered highly logical. Um, Justice Jackson, who was just confirmed to the Supreme Court, she, um, in her confirmation hearings, she made several comments about using the language of originalism, about original meaning, and about plain reading of the text. It's just part of it's just kind of in part of how we view these documents now. This was not the case in the 70s. In the 70s, originalism was considered a fringe belief, and the majority believed that, in the 60s to a good extent too, the majority believed that the Constitution was a living document that justices could interpolate as they felt necessary, um, to expand it as they felt was called for. The originalist reaction to that is, if you need to change a law, it needs to be by voted officials, not by Supreme Court justices, which again is largely agreed upon by the legal establishment now. Less so 50 years ago. So one of the big things that they talk about, or that was mentioned in the Roe v. Wade overturning draft, got to remember it's a draft, is that it was federal overreach. Why was it federal overreach? Because I believe Alito's draft says, quote, there is no such, or the Constitution has no right of abortion, or something along those lines. So, let's go back to the Connecticut case. The Connecticut case was about the state of Connecticut had laws against contraception, and it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court looked at the Constitution and said there is a right of privacy enshrined in the Constitution. And to do that, they looked at a couple different amendments, and they looked at they looked heavily they leaned heavily on uh, the amendment that basically explains that the Bill of Rights is not an exhaustive list, which that makes sense. And then they construe with a couple other amendments, you put them together, and they made this constellation, and they said, look, see, it makes a right of privacy. One of the most famous dissenting opinions in that case said, I agree, this is a stupid law. And that justice believed that the Connecticut law was a bad law that shouldn't be. But he said that we can't make up rights to change a political law because that is not stable. That's something that can collapse. That's as it's not a secure way of doing it. It's not a good way of doing it. It's bad governance. It's bad law. It's bad all around. And that's why he voted against it. That same line of reasoning got used in Roe v. Wade, and then again, as mentioned in the question here, I'm going to try it again. Obergefell v. Hodges. And actually, in Obergefell v. Hodges, if you read a lot of the legal literature out there, including supporters of people who supported the outcome, there was a lot of question about how legally secure that ruling was, because again, it was in an oddity for the modern era. It was basing interpretation of a constitutional right in as a part of a constellation of other rights. Okay, now what overturning Roe v. Wade, as the draft would have it, does is says that the Constitution doesn't protect this. It doesn't say, like I'm sure many people who are already cheering it, it doesn't say that abortion is illegal. It doesn't say abortion is murder. It doesn't say abortion shouldn't be allowed. It doesn't say anything along those lines. There's only one federal law, I believe, about abortion, which would still remain in effect, which I believe it's the partial birth ban. Partial birth abortions are done basically up until the baby is all the way out of the womb, and are very barbaric, and there's a reason bipartisan majority passed that ban on that specific procedure. That's still enshrined in law, and there's nothing in this ruling that would prevent a law legalizing abortion across the country from going through Congress. It's specifically saying that the reasoning used in Roe v. Wade was flawed and is now undone. That puts us back at the pre-Roe v. Wade status quo, which isn't that abortion is illegal. It's that every state has the ability to regulate it as they see fit. You might say that it's exceedingly dumb to let states pick and choose how, the ability to ban procedures. And you'd have a very good argument. But remember, that's the same kind of power. That's the same power that the states use to do things like ban conversion therapies. So, and the same power that states use fundamentally to regulate health facilities in that, making sure they're clean, making sure they're, not killing their patients through negligence. That's the same regulatory power. So that's obviously something the state needs to, So that's, but that, and that becomes part of it. Now, and then the same with the gay marriage case. Um, this doesn't automatically make that case no longer the law of the land, I believe, given the draft, but it does significantly make it vulnerable to challenge. Again, what will happen there is it'll go back to states unless a national law gets made to supersede state laws. And that's just how it's going to work. And this gets back to a very important lesson that both sides need to understand, is that the court is not a good place to try to win your legislative victories. This bit the Republicans in the ass pretty severely whenever they tried to get Obamacare overturned. Parts of Obamacare were found to be unconstitutional in the way that they were implemented, and the court said that part has to change, and now it reads like this. That is all that happened there. Republicans wanted it all overturned. The court said, no, that's a political thing. That's not what we do. This is part of a larger shift that way. And so it's important to view it in that manner. Even say you had say that like half the court retired suddenly, and Biden filled up the court with all of his wish list picks, and Roe v. Wade was overturned. It would not be wise to expect another court case to come up like Roe v. Wade was, and to be ruled on like that, because, like we mentioned, even the most liberal of judges now are having some originalist leanings and originalist thought just become part of the fiber. And really, this is a legislative issue, fundamentally. And yeah, you just got to keep voting for the outcomes you want. People who want to ban abortions locally still have to keep voting that way. People who want to support abortions and have them legal need to keep voting that way. And the states are just going to have to pick and choose. Same thing with gay marriages. Gay marriage will still have a reciprocity, I believe, across state lines. I'm willing to believe that can't be really rolled back because of that there's an equal protection thing there. That's pretty solid. But yeah. So, but remember, all of that discussion is a maybe, because we don't know what that last decision is going to come out. Was the case leaked in order to try to affect people, make them change how it's written? Maybe. Is it? I mean, was it to shame people? Maybe, but I really don't think that any of the 5 Supreme Court justices that voted positively would want to do that, or would bow to that kind of pressure. It's interesting to note that they think that Roberts who voted against, would possibly have joined the majority for a lesser um, peel back. So, like, if it was a limitation upon more limitations added upon Roe v. Wade, um, which have happened in several court cases, even with fairly uh, fairly liberal or balanced courts. Pardon me. Um, so and that could still happen. Like I said, those votes aren't set. This could have changed 15 times by now. So it's very interesting. It's very indicative, but it's not very practically instructive as to what's going to happen. Um, so don't build too much thought about what's happening in the future based on this, other than to note that originalist reading is the era we're in, has been for the last probably 10 years at this point. Originalism has been on the upswing, and it'll be up there for a while, and then it'll go back down, and then it'll come back up and back down. That's just a cycle that happens with the court, is how much originalism is part of the DNA. But yeah, so I hope that ramble gave you some context, that it answered your question, which is the answer is um, but in more words. And yeah, send me more questions when you get them. I'll answer any question I can to the best of my ability. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.